expand our imagination.
Justification for being what you are.
Welcome to Washington Unplugged. I'm Bob Schieffer. Well, Republicans have been basing their midterm campaigns on voter frustrations with the party in charge, but a new poll suggests voters are just as frustrated with Republicans as they are with Democrats. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk today about an interesting ad in the Delaware Senate campaign. Christine O'Donnell is out with that today. We're going to show it to you. We're going to hear more on that poll from the National Journal's Ron Brownstein and from the New York Times Jeff Zeleny. And as it is every Tuesday, Politico's Kiki is back with our weekly series Unplugged in Washington. But first to Ron Brownstein and Jeff Zeleny here in Washington. And Ron, it's your poll at National Journal. Tell us about it, because it seems to show that, I take it, discontent is running right across the board.
Surprisingly, after over a year of 9% unemployment and a series of spectacular partisan fights in Washington, people are intensely discontented with what they're getting out of here. And what's striking, Bob, is that the level of dissatisfaction with Republican leaders in Congress is even higher now in this poll than among Democratic leaders in Congress. Only 24% said they approve of the way Republican leaders in Congress are handling their job. That's even lower than 30% for the Democrats, a sharp decline, actually, for Republicans since the last poll. This number tells you why Democratic candidates are so desperate in this last month before the election to try to convert this from a referendum into a choice, less of a vote on how things are going now than a choice on which direction you want to go going forward. The problem is that it's very difficult to do in a midterm election, and when you see this level of discontent, you know, historically, voters tend to take it out on the party in power.
We are seeing, are we not, Jeff, that a lot of these key races are closing now, but in a lot of them, Republicans still seem to have the advantage.
No question about that. I mean, there's only an extent to which they can close. I mean, in races, that are on the margins, Democrats still, are breathing out there. And in some respects, I think the Democratic Party is interpreting that as good news. But if an incumbent is locked at 42%, say Governor Ted Strickland from Ohio, really fighting for his life, he's locked at 42%. It's going to be harder for him to get 5 points more than it is for his opponent. So. But Republicans are trying to sort of readjust their expectations a touch. The chairman of the House Republicans Congressional Campaign Committee, Pete Sessions, he put out a memo today saying that the Democrats will lose at least functional control of the House of Representatives. So a couple months ago, he was saying, that they would lose total control. So we'll have some expectation setting over the next month. But the fundamentals don't change, what Ron said. I mean,
well, what does that say to you, Ron? Is that they're just kind of lowballing here because a lot of people think that the Republicans are going to take control of the House, and I would say the odds still favor that.
Yeah,
would you not?
I would think the odds do still favor that in the House. I mean, essentially, what's been happening over the last few weeks, I think Jeff would agree, is that Democrats have seen some movement among partisan Democrats, especially in Democratic-leaning states like a California or a Washington state, where there is some indication that places that traditionally lean toward the party, you're seeing more energy in their base voters. And if that happens in those kinds of places, like a California is a perfect example, a Democratic Senate nominee like Barbara Boxer, all she really has to do is consolidate the Democratic base, and it becomes very difficult for the Republican to win. But their troubles extend well beyond that. I mean, in 06 and 08, they won a lot of seats in the House in Republican-leaning places, Republican-leaning parts of the country, true swing parts of the country, and their situation is much more difficult. In some cases, Democratic incumbents are strengthening themselves, but more often they're still facing a turnout gap, an enthusiasm gap, and also a lean against them among independents. And that lean against Democrats among independents, I think, is still pretty constant in a lot of races around the country.
Let me ask you this, Jeff. The Republicans have to capture a net 10 seats to take control in the Senate. Right now, what would you see as the races where we're most likely to see a turnover? And is there any race where we're likely to see a turnover from Republican to Democrat, or are most of the likely turnovers Democrat to Republican?
I mean, Democrats are definitely on defense here. And the one I'm still sort of watching is Wisconsin. I mean, if Senator Feingold is not able to sort of regain some ground here, and win over some of these independent voters, it is a bad sign for him and for a lot of Democrats running for Senate sort of east of the Mississippi. But Ronna is absolutely right. In these Democratic states like California and Washington State, the Democrats have more to work with, I guess, if you will. But
Connecticut, potentially.
Right, exactly. But and also West Virginia. I mean, we did not have this on our radar screens at all, that Governor Joe Manchin would be having, a difficult time here. But
he's running for Bobby Byrd's
He's
Senate
running
seat.
for, held by, it's a Democratic seat. I mean, talk about Democratic property here. But one ad went up. President Obama was in the ad, tying that to Joe Manchin, and he sunk instantly. It's not over for him yet, but that's a race to watch.
Can I make a different point about that race? Because it seems to me that race should have been on the radar, and I always wondered why they called the special election this fall. West Virginia is one of the states where blue-collar white voters without a college education, still dominate the electorate. A majority of the voters in West Virginia, as in Wisconsin, states that are heavily white and heavily blue-collar. Barack Obama's approval rating in this week's weekly Gallup tracking poll, the average they do every week, among white voters without a college education, is 33%. It is significantly lower even than Bill Clinton's at this point in '94. And if you go back to '94, the overwhelming impetus of what happened when Republicans took over was a sharp movement in their direction among these working class white voters. Then, as you remember, Bob, it was mostly cultural issues like guns and gay rights and so forth. This time it's economic distress and an ideological backlash. But any state, Arkansas, West Virginia, Wisconsin, many of these congressional districts, any place where Democrats have to win a lot of blue-collar whites in order to win, I think you can't count any of them as entirely safe.
Which of the races would you say we're most likely to see a turnover from a Democrat to Republican right now, Ron? If you just had to pick one or two.
Well, I think in the Senate, I mean, at the very top of the list, Arkansas, Indiana, and North Dakota. Pennsylvania has proven surprisingly, I think, difficult for Democrats because it is a state with more of a mix. It has more of that upscale suburban vote that has been trending toward them. I think that would be the next one. I think after that, you'd probably put Wisconsin and Colorado. And maybe Colorado is becoming even tougher than Wisconsin. Nevada is, in that mix as well for Harry Reid. I think those seven are at the very top of the list. What else would you put in there, Jeff?
I think that's it. I mean, then the others, open seats. Democrats are struggling in all of them. Ohio not going to win. New Hampshire struggling. So Democrats do not have enough to work with in terms of trying to pick off a seat or two there.
Well, the thing we haven't talked about, of course, is Delaware, where Republicans pretty much thought they had a lock on what had been a Democratic seat held by Joe Biden, and then of all things, Mike Castle, who is has been the Republican congressman, a former governor up there, gets beat in the primary by this young woman who comes out of nowhere, Christine O'Donnell, and this is a weird one. There's no question about it. And just to underline it, here is the ad that Christine O'Donnell put on the air today. Look at this.
I'm not a witch. I'm nothing you've heard. I'm you. None of us are perfect. But none of us can be happy with what we see all around us. Politicians who think spending, trading favors, and backroom deals are the ways to stay in office. I'll go to Washington and do what you'd do. I'm Christine O'Donnell, and I approve this message. I'm you.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, that's the year. I mean, in this poll that we have this year, we asked we'd be more or less likely to vote, the poll this week, would you be more or less likely to vote for someone if Barack Obama endorsed them? Less likely. Sarah Palin endorsed them? Less likely. The Tea Party? Less likely. There is no institution connected to the political system, and you could argue more broadly, the entire elite power structure of the country that voters have faith in. So, if you're someone like Christine O'Donnell, you're trying to identify yourself as the voice of the people, come to bring common sense to Washington. Look, when voters are discontented, they will go walk over hot coals. They will go very far to send that message of discontent. But they won't go an infinite distance. And she may be one of those candidates who are just still outside the pale.
Well, I mean, this is someone that had the Tea Party backing and so forth. And until she won the nomination, people thought Republicans were going to win this in a walk. Now it's my understanding the Democrat is up in double digits in the polls, right?
He is, and Republicans have basically decided, at least here in Washington, that they're not going to invest their money there, which is why they have decided this week they're putting $2.2 million on TV in West Virginia. Buys a lot of ads. But Christine O'Donnell, she, in many respects, fits the profile of the type of outsider candidates we've seen, with one exception. she has a record. No one knew that she spent all these hours on television. So the reason she's saying I'm not a witch is because of an old clip that she had on the Bill Maher show saying that, in fact, she dabbled in witchcraft. So the difference with her is she doesn't have a voting record, but, I mean, she's been running her opinions out there on television for years. A problem.
You know?
And while you're saying that, you know, the people here in Washington are not investing in that campaign, she has raised a couple of $1 million since she won the nomination.
And look, that's part of what's changed politics, and one of the reasons why we saw so many primary challenges work this year. As a very aggressive, ideologically militant candidate, you can now raise a national audience that will fund you and support you in a way that would not have been possible before. I mean, look where her money came from. It didn't only come from Delaware. It came probably from, it came from all over the country, and that is something new. A Joe Miller, things like that. It's a very different world.
And the person who made the ad, Fred Davis, one of the best ad makers in the Republican side of the business,
specializes in witch defense. Yeah, that's
who knows?
A little subgenre there.
All right. Well, I was going to say at this point we'll turn to the weirder kinds of stories in the news, but it's an easy transition here. Kiki is here with us, Kiki Ryan from Politico, with the unplugged side of Washington Unplugged. And Kiki, what do you got for us today?
I guess since we're talking about weird things, let's go with the Salahis. They were here this weekend and they auctioned off the sari, the red and gold sari that she wore to the infamous White House state dinner. It sold for $7,000 and they were only estimating between 2 and 3. And it was the funniest part about it is the person that bought the sari was actually the hair salon who prepped her the day of. So now they're getting their little publicity off of it, continued that. They are too. It's a win-win for everyone involved. And we'll see actually what plays out this Thursday. It's the final episode of the series. So
well, I mean, what would one do with the sari?
I talked to the owner, the buyer of it, and he said, I think we should start a museum in Washington for all the weird stuff. And he's like, or maybe Madame Tussauds, that she should have a wax figure. So maybe we'll see it in a museum.
If you're going to have a museum in Washington for all the weird stuff, you better get something about the size of the Dulles Airport or something.
Yeah.
I would say, because we would have no trouble.
There's a lot of weird stuff
filling
here.
it up. What else?
Yeah. Let's see. Last night I was out at the Habitat for Humanity Gala, which honored Jimmy Carter and all his work that he's done there. And it was great to see him just 3 days after getting out of the hospital. He was there. He spent the whole gala there, whole time there. Shaking people's hands, saying hi to old friends, was in great spirits. And he spent the whole day before the gala building homes. So he had a packed day, so really full of energy. And he's going on a 6-city tour now, building homes to the end of the week.
Any idea what it was that caused him to have to go to the hospital after getting sick on that flight?
Yeah, they said it was a gastric intestinal infection. So he was in the hospital for 2 days, and he kind of made a joke like, "Oh, I had a 2-day vacation. It was nice to rest up." And he's they're building 86 homes this week in honor of his 86th birthday.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Kiki.
Sure.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Ron. And that's it for Washington Unplugged. Join us here every day on CBSNews.com, and I'll be back here Thursday with an interview with Bob Woodward, whose new book, Obama's Wars, has been making waves here in Washington and also around the country. Bob Schieffer here. Hope you have a good day.